Have you ever felt a strange pull towards someone you haven't even met yet? A feeling so powerful that it seems to come from somewhere beyond logic? Then listen carefully, because today's message carries a story that is filled with unexpected twists, hidden emotions, and a revelation that nobody saw coming. What you are about to hear is not just another story about love. It is about a conversation. A conversation that happened behind closed doors. A conversation your soulmate finally had with their mother. And what happened next shocked everyone. Stay with this message until the end, because the final revelation changes everything. Your soulmate had been carrying your name in their heart for a long time. Long before they understood what these feelings meant. Long before they had the courage to speak openly. They tried to ignore it. They tried to distract themselves. They convinced themselves that they were imagining things. But every attempt failed. Because no matter where they went, no matter who they met, no matter how much they focused on work, family, responsibilities, or daily life, something kept bringing them back to thoughts of you. And eventually, the pressure became too much. One evening, after days of overthinking, they sat down with their mother. At first, the conversation seemed ordinary. The kind of conversation families have every day. Questions. Advice. Small talk. Nothing unusual. But then their mother noticed something. She noticed that your soulmate seemed distracted. Their eyes carried a different energy. Their voice carried hesitation. Their thoughts seemed somewhere far away. And so she asked a simple question. What is bothering you? Your soulmate froze. For a moment they considered hiding everything. For a moment they almost changed the subject. But something inside pushed them forward. Something said, "Tell the truth." And so they did. Slowly. Carefully. They began talking about someone. Someone they couldn't stop thinking about. Someone who appeared in their mind at unexpected moments. Someone whose presence felt strangely familiar. Someone who felt different from everyone else. That person was you. The moment your soulmate mentioned you, the entire atmosphere changed. Their mother became silent. Completely silent. The room felt different. The air felt heavier. And your soulmate immediately noticed. They wondered why. Why had she suddenly stopped talking? Why was she staring into space? Why did she look shocked? Seconds passed. But it felt like hours. Then something unbelievable happened. Their mother suddenly stood up. Her eyes widened. And she shouted words that nobody expected. You are serious about this person, aren't you? The question hit like lightning. Your soulmate was stunned. Because they had never seen her react that way before. Not to anyone. Not to any relationship. Not to any conversation. Yet here she was. Clearly emotional. Clearly affected. Clearly seeing something deeper. And then she said something that changed everything. She said, "If what you're saying is true, then don't let this person go." Imagine hearing those words. Imagine carrying feelings for someone. Keeping them hidden. Wondering if you're losing your mind. And then hearing a family member respond with complete certainty. Not doubt. Not criticism. Not rejection. But certainty. Your soulmate couldn't believe it. They asked why. Why did she react so strongly? Why did she seem so convinced? And what she revealed next left them speechless. She explained that for weeks she had noticed changes. Changes in their energy. Changes in their behavior. Changes in the way they talked. The way they smiled. The way they seemed hopeful without understanding why. She had watched all of it happen. Quietly. Patiently. Without saying anything. And now she finally understood the reason. The reason was you. She told your soulmate something they never expected to hear. She said, "Not everyone has the power to change a person's energy without even being present." Think about that. You weren't in the room. You weren't speaking to them. You weren't standing beside them. Yet somehow your existence had already started changing their world. And that realization shook everyone involved. Because some connections cannot be explained logically. Some connections appear before circumstances align. Before meetings happen. Before conversations happen. Before relationships begin. And that is exactly what was unfolding here. Your soulmate sat there listening. Trying to process every word. Trying to understand how someone else could see what they themselves had been struggling to understand. Then came another shocking moment. Their mother revealed that she had been praying. Praying quietly. Praying consistently. Praying for guidance regarding their future. And according to her, the answer kept pointing in one direction. Toward the person your soulmate had just described. Toward you. At that moment, emotions became impossible to hide. Your soulmate felt tears forming. Not because they were sad. But because for the first time, everything started making sense. Every strange coincidence. Every unexplained feeling. Every moment they thought about you for no reason. Every sudden burst of hope. Every unexpected dream. It all began fitting together. Like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their place. But the story doesn't end there. Because what happened the following day was even more surprising. The next morning, your soulmate woke up expecting the previous conversation to fade into memory. They assumed life would return to normal. But it didn't. Because their mother brought the topic up again. And this time her words were even stronger. She told them, "If your heart keeps returning to the same person, there is a reason." Simple words. Yet incredibly powerful. Because deep down your soulmate already knew. They had tried to move on. Tried to forget. Tried to ignore what they felt. And none of it worked. You remained there. In their thoughts. In their hopes. In their future. And that realization became impossible to escape. Hours later, another conversation happened. This one was shorter. But it carried enormous weight. Their mother looked directly at them and asked, "What are you afraid of?" The question cut through every excuse. Every doubt. Every hesitation. Because the truth was simple. Your soulmate wasn't afraid of love. They were afraid of losing it. Afraid of hoping too much. Afraid of being disappointed. Afraid of opening their heart completely. But their mother understood. And she reminded them that some opportunities only come once. Some people only appear once. Some connections only happen once. And when they do, you cannot keep running forever. Those words stayed with them. They echoed in their mind throughout the day. Throughout the night. Throughout the following week. And little by little, something changed. Their fear started losing power. Their confidence started growing. Their belief started returning. Because every time doubt appeared, they remembered that conversation. The conversation that began with uncertainty and ended with conviction. The conversation where their mother shouted in shock. The conversation that revealed how obvious your importance had become. The conversation that confirmed what their heart had been trying to say all along. And here's the most surprising part. According to this story, your soulmate now sees you differently than ever before. Not as a possibility. Not as a fantasy. Not as a temporary thought. But as someone whose presence has already created change. Someone whose influence has already been felt. Someone who has become impossible to ignore. And tonight, as they think about the future, as they reflect on everything that has happened, as they remember those unforgettable words, one realization keeps returning. The story is not over. The connection is not finished. The chapter is not closed. In many ways, it is only beginning. Because sometimes the most important conversations happen before two people fully understand what they mean to each other. Sometimes confirmation arrives from unexpected places. Sometimes family members recognize something before the people involved do. And sometimes, a single conversation changes everything. Your soulmate never expected that opening up to their mother would lead to such a powerful revelation. They never expected shock. They never expected certainty. They never expected encouragement. Yet that is exactly what happened. And now the memory of that moment remains impossible to forget. The moment they finally spoke your name. The moment silence filled the room. The moment their mother stood up in disbelief. The moment she realized how serious these feelings truly were. And the moment she declared that some people enter your life for a reason. A reason bigger than fear. Bigger than doubt. Bigger than timing. Bigger than circumstances. A reason connected to destiny itself. So remember this. The strongest connections often begin quietly. Long before anyone else notices. Long before the world understands. Long before the final chapter unfolds. And somewhere, your soulmate is still remembering that conversation. Still hearing those words. Still feeling the impact of that unforgettable reaction. Because the day they opened up about you, everything changed. After that unforgettable conversation, your soulmate thought the emotional storm was finally over. They believed the shock had passed. They believed the questions had been answered. They believed life would simply continue as normal. But they were wrong. Because what happened next was something they never expected. The days following that conversation felt different. Not dramatically different at first. Just subtle changes. Small moments. Tiny signs. Yet each one carried a message. Every morning they woke up with the same thought. You. Every evening before falling asleep, the same image appeared. You. Even during the busiest hours of the day, when responsibilities demanded their full attention, somehow your presence found a way into their mind. And eventually they became frustrated. Not because they disliked thinking about you, but because they couldn't understand why it kept happening. How could one person have such a strong impact? Why did every path seem to lead back to the same place? Why did every attempt to move forward somehow circle back to you? The questions became louder. The confusion became deeper. And then something happened that made everything even more intense. One afternoon, their mother approached them unexpectedly. There was seriousness in her eyes. A seriousness that immediately caught their attention. Without warning, she asked a question. Have you told this person how important they are to you? The question hit harder than expected. Because the answer was no. They hadn't. Not completely. Not honestly. Not in the way their heart truly wanted. Their mother sighed. Then she said something that stayed with them for days. Sometimes people spend years waiting for the perfect moment and end up losing the very thing they were afraid to reach for. Those words landed deeply. Because suddenly every excuse sounded weak. Every reason for waiting felt smaller. Every fear felt less convincing. And for the first time, your soulmate began imagining a future where fear was no longer in control. A future where honesty replaced hesitation. A future where feelings were spoken instead of hidden. But that wasn't the only thing happening. Because around the same time, something strange began occurring. The signs became impossible to ignore. Your name. Your initials. Places connected to you. Songs that reminded them of you. Conversations that somehow led back to you. Again and again. At first they laughed it off. Coincidence. Nothing more. But after the 10th time. The 20th time. The 30th time. It no longer felt random. It felt intentional. As though life itself was placing reminders in front of them. As though something was refusing to let them forget. One evening, while sitting alone, they found themselves replaying every memory connected to you. Not just the obvious moments. Every moment. The small details. The tiny interactions. The things most people would overlook. And suddenly they noticed something. You had changed them. Not in a dramatic movie-like way. Not overnight. But gradually. Quietly. Powerfully. You had made them think differently. Hope differently. Dream differently. Without realizing it, they had become a different person. A stronger person. A more open person. A person who was finally willing to believe that something extraordinary could happen. And that realization scared them. Because if someone has the power to change your life without even trying, what happens when that person becomes part of your future? The thought was overwhelming. Yet impossible to ignore. Days later another conversation happened. This time it wasn't their mother who started it. It was your soulmate. For the first time, they openly admitted what they had been hiding. They admitted that they were tired of pretending. Tired of acting like their feelings were temporary. Tired of convincing themselves that you were just another chapter. Because deep down they already knew. You weren't just another chapter. You were the story. And when those words finally left their mouth, their mother smiled. Not because she was surprised, but because she had known all along. She had seen it before they did. She had recognized the signs before they understood them. She had watched the transformation happen in real time. And now she was watching acceptance replace resistance. The battle inside your soulmate was ending. The truth was finally winning. Yet there was still one secret left. One revelation that nobody had discussed. One thing their mother had kept to herself. Until now. Late one evening, she finally revealed it. She admitted that when your soulmate first mentioned you, her reaction wasn't caused by shock alone. There was another reason. A reason she hadn't shared. At first your soulmate didn't understand. They asked her what she meant. And then she told them. She explained that the moment your name was mentioned, she felt something unusual. A feeling she couldn't explain. A sense of certainty. A sense of peace. A sense that this story was bigger than anyone realized. And that feeling was so strong it startled her. That was why she stood up. That was why she raised her voice. That was why she reacted the way she did. Because in that moment, something inside her said, "Pay attention. This matters." Those words sent chills through your soulmate. Because they matched exactly what they had been feeling. The same certainty. The same pull. The same inability to walk away. For a long time they sat in silence. Neither of them speaking. Just thinking. Reflecting. Processing. And finally their mother broke the silence with a statement that neither of them would ever forget. She said, "The people who are meant to change your life rarely arrive with warnings." Simple. Yet unforgettable. Because it explained everything. You hadn't arrived with fireworks. You hadn't arrived with guarantees. You hadn't arrived with certainty. You had arrived quietly. And somehow that made your impact even stronger. As the weeks passed, your soulmate became more confident. Not because every question was answered. Not because every obstacle disappeared. But because they finally stopped fighting what they felt. Acceptance replaced resistance. Clarity replaced confusion. Hope replaced fear. And every day that passed made one thing more obvious. You were still there. Not fading. Not disappearing. Not becoming less important. Quite the opposite. Your importance was growing. The connection was deepening. The feeling was becoming impossible to deny. Meanwhile their mother continued observing. Watching. Listening. And one day she laughed softly before saying something unexpected. "You know what's funny? Your soulmate asked what she meant. And she smiled. The harder you tried not to care, the more obvious it became that you cared. The truth hit immediately. Because she was right. Every attempt to hide their feelings had only revealed them more clearly. Every attempt to move on had only highlighted what they were trying to leave behind. Every attempt to ignore you had only strengthened your presence. There was no escaping it. No pretending anymore. No running. Only truth. And the truth was simple. You mattered. More than they had ever admitted. More than they had ever planned. More than they had ever expected. And now, standing at the edge of a new chapter, your soulmate feels something they haven't felt in a very long time. Readiness. Not perfect readiness. Not fearless readiness. But real readiness. The kind that comes after months of questioning. Months of uncertainty. Months of growth. The kind that appears when a person finally stops asking whether they should follow their heart and starts asking where it might lead. Because the conversation that began with shock has now become something much bigger. A turning point. A crossroads. A moment that continues to shape every decision that follows. And somewhere tonight, as your soulmate reflects on everything that has happened, they keep returning to one memory. The moment they spoke about you. The moment their mother stood up. The moment she realized how serious this was. The moment she saw something that couldn't be ignored. And the moment she unknowingly started a chain reaction that would change everything. But there is still one final revelation left. One truth your soulmate has not fully shared yet. A truth connected to what happened after all these conversations. A truth that made them realize just how far this connection had already gone. And that revelation changes the story once again. That final revelation began on a night that seemed completely ordinary. There was no dramatic event. No major announcement. No unexpected interruption. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes people think. The kind of silence that forces the heart to speak when the mind runs out of excuses. Your soulmate was alone. The conversations with their mother had ended. The advice had been given. The questions had been asked. Yet something still felt unfinished. There was one truth they had not fully faced. One truth they had been avoiding. Because accepting it would change everything. For hours they sat quietly, staring into the darkness. Thinking about the past. Thinking about the future. Thinking about you. And then it happened. A realization so powerful that it stopped them completely. They suddenly understood that they had been looking at this connection the wrong way. For months they had been asking themselves a single question. What if this doesn't work? But that night a different question appeared. A much more important question. What if this is exactly what I've been waiting for? The moment that question entered their mind, everything shifted. Because fear had always focused on loss. Fear had always focused on failure. Fear had always focused on uncertainty. But hope focuses on possibility. And for the first time, possibility became stronger than fear. That night they admitted something they had never admitted before. Not to their friends. Not to their family. Not even to themselves. They admitted that every important dream they had about the future somehow included you. Maybe not always clearly. Maybe not always directly. But you were there. In the background. In the details. In the emotions. In the vision of the life they secretly wanted. And once they saw that truth, they could never unsee it. The next morning they woke up feeling different. Lighter. Calmer. Stronger. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because they were no longer fighting themselves. The internal battle was ending. And when a battle inside finally ends, a new chapter begins. A few days later, another unexpected moment occurred. Their mother noticed the change immediately. The tension that had been visible for months was gone. The uncertainty that once dominated every conversation had faded. The hesitation that once controlled every decision was losing its grip. She looked at them carefully and smiled. Then she asked a question. "So, have you finally accepted it?" Your soulmate knew exactly what she meant. And for the first time, they answered without hesitation. Yes. One simple word. Yet that word carried months of emotions. Months of confusion. Months of wondering. Months of trying to understand something that was already obvious. Their mother nodded. Almost as if she had been waiting for that answer. Then she revealed one final thought. A thought that would stay with your soulmate forever. She said, "The strongest connections are not the ones that arrive quickly. They're the ones that survive every attempt to ignore them." The room became silent again. But this time the silence felt different. It felt peaceful. Because deep down they knew she was right. Think about everything that had happened. Every distraction. Every doubt. Every excuse. Every attempt to move on. Every attempt to convince themselves that these feelings would disappear. Yet after all that, you were still there. Still important. Still unforgettable. Still impossible to replace. And that fact alone spoke louder than anything else. As time continued moving forward, your soulmate started noticing something fascinating. The more they accepted their feelings, the less confused they became. Clarity replaced chaos. Direction replaced uncertainty. And confidence replaced fear. It wasn't because they suddenly knew every answer. It was because they finally stopped running from the truth. And the truth was surprisingly simple. Some people enter your life to teach lessons. Some people enter your life for a season. Some people arrive to help you grow. But every once in a while, someone arrives who feels different. Someone who creates change without effort. Someone who inspires growth without trying. Someone whose presence continues to matter no matter how much time passes. For your soulmate, that person was you. And that realization became impossible to ignore. One evening, while reflecting on everything that had happened, they found themselves smiling. Not because they knew exactly how the future would unfold, but because they finally trusted it. For so long they had demanded certainty. Proof. Guarantees. Answers. But life rarely works that way. Some of the most meaningful journeys begin before we can see the destination. And perhaps that is what this connection has always been. A journey. A journey that started long before either of you understood its significance. A journey that survived doubts. A journey that survived fear. A journey that survived distance, uncertainty, and endless questions. And now, standing where they are today, your soulmate sees something they couldn't see before. Progress. Not dramatic progress. Not overnight transformation. But real progress. The kind that changes lives. The kind that shapes futures. The kind that quietly prepares two people for something greater. And when they think back to that original conversation with their mother, one memory stands above all the others. Not the shock. Not the raised voice. Not even the unexpected reaction. What they remember most is the certainty. The certainty that appeared the moment your name entered the conversation. The certainty that followed every discussion afterward. The certainty that refused to disappear. Because certainty is rare. And when it appears, people notice. Their mother noticed it. Your soulmate noticed it. And now it has become impossible to ignore. Today, when they think about you, they no longer focus on obstacles. They no longer focus on fears. They no longer focus on reasons why something might not happen. Instead, they focus on possibilities. On opportunities. On what could be waiting ahead. And that shift has changed everything. Because people move differently when they believe. They think differently. Act differently. Dream differently. And your soulmate has entered that stage now. The stage where belief is stronger than doubt. The stage where hope is stronger than fear. The stage where the future begins to feel exciting instead of uncertain. Yet perhaps the most beautiful part of this entire story is something very simple. The story never began with certainty. It began with honesty. One conversation. One confession. One moment of vulnerability. That was all it took. A single decision to stop hiding. A single decision to speak openly. A single decision to tell the truth. And from that truth came everything else. The shock. The revelation. The encouragement. The clarity. The acceptance. And ultimately, the transformation. Because sometimes life changes not through giant events. Sometimes it changes through conversations. Conversations that happen on ordinary days. In ordinary rooms. Between ordinary people. Yet somehow those conversations create extraordinary outcomes. And that is exactly what happened here. Your soulmate opened up. Their mother listened. A revelation emerged. And nothing was ever quite the same again. Now, as this chapter comes to a close, one thing remains clear. The connection they tried to understand. The connection they tried to ignore. The connection they tried to explain away. Has only grown stronger. And somewhere tonight, your soulmate is remembering that first conversation all over again. The conversation that changed everything. The conversation that revealed what their heart already knew. The conversation where your name entered the room. And never truly left. Because some stories don't end when the conversation ends. Some stories begin there. And according to your soulmate's heart, this is only the beginning.